Well, I was raised a regular middle-class American person, went to church, grew up a Catholic, and lived a very common kind of middle class, a little better middle class probably upbringing. And I just, from a young age, I had a couple experiences that caused me to believe in God. And as time went on and I grew up, I started realizing how important it was, really, how important that God is, this how it's. So when I was young, like when I was around 12 or 13 years old, I went to the Stations of the Cross, which is a Catholic thing. Somehow I went through it. I was by myself. My parents weren't around. My mother sent me there. And it just dawned on me the greatness of the Son of God and just who He was, and just what He did for us. It impressed me. And I really, after I got back, I really cried out to God. Went out on my front porch. I was 13, I think. And I felt like our Father spoke to me there. And even though my life, as I grew up, I did things I regretted and didn't treat people right the way I would have liked to, still, in my inner man, I knew I was accountable for those things, especially in my relationships with women, particularly. The selfishness that's there. So as time went on, and my path became more narrow because I was there was troubles beginning in my life. So I ended up going to college. I was 17 when I went to college, and you live on campus, and I was too young to be in that situation, really, but I started hearing things that made me realize that conscience and convictions about certain things were not something that was condoned in regular society, in college society. I started understanding a little bit more about liberal thinking, a little bit more about, that heading away from that kind of accountability towards our Creator and other human beings, how you treated them. And, me being, one of those. And so when I was in college, I wrote this term paper. It's kind of funny, sort of a thing, but I wrote this term paper about the amendment in the Constitution about the right to keep and bear arms. Now, I grew up in South Carolina, so it was pretty widespread that folks, believed in that right as an American citizen. And I wrote a paper pro that, and my professor called me in his office and was pretty much telling me that I wasn't going to pass unless I wrote my paper contrary to that. So growing up, you just start becoming more aware. You just start becoming more aware of God, society, human beings, and there's really a lot there. And so I ended up dropping out of college in my sophomore year because I just did not understand really what was going on well enough to pursue a business administration degree and continue on that path. I actually talked to my folks about it, and they really didn't understand what was going on in me. But so I ended up dropping out of school, and I eventually joined the Navy. And so I joined the Navy, and because I wanted to see what was really going on in society. I didn't understand it in a way that I had this thing where I really believed in God, but it was hard for me to understand. Like one of the things, say, like Christmas. That was a hard thing for me to understand. I always had a nativity scene on my dresser, but then Santa Claus was out in the living room, and it was this strange thing that was difficult for me to figure out. And so there's basically this thing where I knew there was a God, and I knew that He was interested in me, and that there was an interest there, and I had an interest in Him, you know, even though I wasn't really an upright person, really. And really, I began to see sense my need for forgiveness, really, and for the ways I treated others, but it wasn't really fully developed yet. So I went in the military, and I traveled the world. I was a jet engine mechanic. I was enlisted, so. And, you know, there were all kinds of things to get into there that didn't really promote a good conscience. I'm not going to go through the details of that, but there came a certain point in the military where I realized that I really needed to, that I still believe in God. I mean, you just can't go out on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean and just see the stars and see the sunrise and smell the air there and just not believe there's a God, like there's a God. And just everything, there's so many other experiences and ways that He answered my prayers at different times, saved me from some really foolish, stupid things that I did. And I told Him, I said, if you get me out of this, I'll never do this again. And so eventually it came to the point where I couldn't do anything other than find Him, because there wasn't a lot left to do other than, because I gave my word and He had saved me, so I couldn't just keep on doing the same thing. So then I got out of the military, and at a certain point in the military, I came to this place where I said, okay, there's either a God and there's hope for man, for me. Either there's a God and there's hope, or there's no God and there's no hope. And I was about 21 when I was thinking this way. So I decided that I was going to believe in God. And I really decided that I was going to believe in Jesus at that time. I said, I'm going to believe in Jesus because I believe that. And I'm going to pursue keeping His word, because I don't believe that the Christian system was true to Him, because it was too mixed in with government, was too mixed in with just conventional society, too worldly. It's just too worldly. In comparison to His life, there just wasn't like a real connection. I saw no real connection there. So I said, okay, this is where I'm going, and I'm gonna believe in Jesus, and I'm gonna seek to keep His commandments, and like try to find a way to become a real disciple where I could really follow Him in a real way and actually gain forgiveness, which was beginning to become very valuable to me, because I really wasn't happy with myself about how I treated others particularly. So I ended up getting out of the military, and I went to Ireland. And, you know, a few things happened from there, but I ended up going to Ireland, and I sold all my stuff. I had gotten out of the military, and I was working in Atlanta delivering kitchen equipment. But I was just not happy, and I really needed to go pursue what was really in my heart. So I sold all my stuff, because that's according to the gospel. You have to give up all your own possessions. So I sold everything, took an airplane to Ireland, and I was going to work for my keep, because it says that, you know, just the word of Messiah, seek first the kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be granted to you. That's a big thing about being a disciple, not being anxious for food, clothing, and shelter, the way it talks about in Matthew. I think it's Matthew 6. So I went to Ireland, and I ended up hitchhiking around, and I'd taken a vow of chastity. And I took a vow that I wasn't going to drink alcohol or smoke marijuana anymore, because all those things worked together, and I wasn't happy with how that worked out. So I went over there and I worked on a small farm there. I always desired to learn farming, and I worked on a small farm there. And it was in the western part of Ireland, outside of Galway, the town of Galway, in a little town called Gort in the mountains there. And it was amazing being there. But I could really pursue what I was thinking. So I was fasting 3 days a week and crying out to God. And in the midst of that, I began to question whether, one, if Jesus was really his name. Like, I wondered. And I read this thing, it's in the gospel where it talks about, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my memorial name forever. And I thought that was, so I took note of that and I started praying that way. And then, just things were happening. I was in Ireland for about 8 months, kind of overstayed my visa a little bit. And because I was thinking I was going to head into the countryside, actually. This was my plan, was just to kind of like, I didn't understand so many things about being a disciple, but I started realizing how much I really needed to be taught, like I needed a teacher to help me. And then it was kind of an interesting thing, because when I grew up, the Jesus movement was happening, so I was about 10, 11, 12 years old when the Jesus movement happened, and my mother had this Jesus Christ Superstar album that she would play over and over and over and over again. And so that was all in my consciousness. Like I said, we weren't Christians, but somehow my mother, she had something in her. And so anyway, I wondered if somebody in the Jesus movement actually received from our Creator, actually got the anointing or the truth of the Holy Spirit. And so I wondered about that. And so this teacher, I had that working in me. I was thinking about this teacher and how I need to be taught. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I need to go back to the United States and hitchhike in New England. I mean, it was a ministering spirit coming to me, actually. It wasn't something I just came up with on my own. It was just all of a sudden I was thinking, man, I really didn't want to come back to the United States because all my bad habits were there. So, but I was seeking that true baptism where I really could no longer live for myself and really receive forgiveness, because I really needed forgiveness. So I ended up coming back to the United States. I had a little money saved up from when I was in the military and worked out a plane ticket home, and ended up going to Ithaca, New York, and starting to hitchhike across New England there. And what I was doing was my hope was, or what I had heard in my inner person was, I need to tell people I'm trying to follow the teachings of Jesus when they ask me where I'm going, which was very difficult for me because I wasn't raised evangelical or talking about Jesus to anyone at all. And so I believed that God had spoken that to me, so I started doing that. And it was pretty amazing, just how our Father provided for me when I was hitchhiking. I'd never really hitchhiked before, ever. So I was hitchhiked across Route 2. If you look up there and if you look up in Vermont, you can see Route 2 goes through New Hampshire and then it goes up to Maine. So I was hitchhiking there, telling people that. I went through this little town called St. Johnsbury, told the man I was trying to follow the teachings of Jesus. He said, you should go to Island Pond, Vermont. There's some people there, you should meet them. This was in 1987. So I was like, it was almost scary hearing something. So I kept going. I didn't go to Island Pond right then. I kept going on Route 2. And in the same day, another man said to me, you should go to Island Pond. There's some people there, you should meet them. And when I heard that, because you know how it says in the Bible, it says where there are two witnesses, it's the truth. I had read that in the gospel. And I was looking for something like that was objective. And I was like, okay, I'm fasting 3 days a week. I'm crying out to God. And these two people are telling me this the same day. Okay, so I went back to Ithaca. I was hitchhiking so fast, I mean, people were just picking me up and taking care of me the whole time, pretty much. So I got back to Ithaca, and I was really considering what I was going to do, because it was a little scary, actually. But I started going. I hitchhiked out of Ithaca and met people and kept going. And so I ended up in Burlington, Vermont, at a certain point. And, you know, Burlington isn't known as like really one of the more conservative cities in you know, New England, and it wasn't, you know, but so anyway, this girl picked me up hitchhiking, and we probably wouldn't have naturally got along with one another, but it wasn't really a natural thing. So she was great. I'm thankful she picked me up, and so right away she pulled into a gas station. She was driving a convertible, whatever. And when she got back in the car, she asked me where I was going. And I was kind of in a little bit of a balance, thinking, well, I'll go to Canada. I'm just kind of waiting for confirmation. I told her, I said, I'm thinking about going to Canada. She just looked at me like, just with disdain, and said, what are you going up there for? And I just felt like it was our Father speaking to me, you know. I didn't actually listen to her right then. I got on the road to Canada, and after about 15, 20 minutes, I said, I need to go to Island Pond. So I got on the road to Island Pond, which was like, you know, a 30-yard walk from where I was hitchhiking to go to Canada, because it's pretty near Canada up there. And I had never been to New England before. You might be able to tell that by my accent, but this lady picked me up, took me down the road, bought me lunch. You know, it was just like, okay, all this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I didn't have any money. I was just out there. Just, Abba, what are you going to do for me? What should I do? So anyway, I ended up in Newport, Vermont, which, you know, tiny little town. And a man picked me up, and you know, I told him I was going to Island Pond. And by this time, it's an amazing thing had happened to me, you know, on my way there, where I went into the state legislative library in Concord, New Hampshire. And I just walked in, and I looked up the word Jesus Christ in a Roman Catholic encyclopedia. And I looked it up, and it was amazing. I looked it up, Jesus Christ, and right after it said Jesus Christ, it said in Hebrew is Yahshua, which means Yahweh's salvation. I am mighty and powerful to save. That was what it said. I was flabbergasted when I saw it, and I just closed the book and I walked out, and I was just like, oh, but how in the world am I going to incorporate this into my life? Nobody's even going to know who I'm talking about. And so, I think that was on Wednesday. No, it might have been actually like early on Thursday. Like I said, I was hitchhiking very fast, and I didn't have it. No cell phones back then, so. So a man picked me up, and this last man picked me up out of Newport and took me the back road into Island Pond, which you can probably imagine the back road to Island Pond is quite a bit more desolate than the main road to Island Pond, which was desolate already. If you look up there at the map, I mean, you know, it's out there in the sticks. So this man picked me up, and he said, I told him I was going to Island Pond, and he said, I think it's a cult. And it was interesting the way he said it to me, because it was like he wanted to believe that himself in a way. It was just a very interesting little thing. So I kept going, he dropped me off. And so I was on the side of the road there, and it was getting to be evening, and I was crying out to God. if you want me to get to Island Pond tonight, you're going to have to get me there because I can't get there myself. I wasn't hitchhiking at night at all. So I was looking up, it was just amazing, the beauty of everything there. It was in June, like mid-June. The snow had just gotten off the ground about 3 weeks before that, so it was very early spring there. So I was off the road kind of getting to know these heifers. If you don't know what a heifer is, it's a female bovine that's never had a calf. So they're small, they had a little barn, and I was seeing if they were going to have hospitality on me because I was looking for a place to stay for the night. And right at that moment, like I said, I was off the road. The man who picked me up and said it was a cult stopped on the road with his daughter to pick me up and take me to Island Pond. He said, I'm taking her out to teach her how to drive, but he was looking for me. And he actually stopped there, took me right to the front door of the restaurant in Island Pond. And, you know, I had just prayed that our Father, if he didn't want me to get to Island Pond that night, then, you know, I wasn't going to get there. And he just, like, worked it out. And so I got there. I mean, I was pretty excited, actually, when I got there because everything I'd been hoping for and desiring, a real baptism, like forgiveness, the ability to really be a disciple, to be taught. So I went into the restaurant. The restaurant was closed at that time. They were doing some renovations, and I was talking to the lady in the front. And she wasn't quite ready to deal with me, really, because I was so excited and on a roll that I could hardly communicate, you know. But so she sent me back into the kitchen to talk to these two men in the kitchen, and they got to a point in the conversation and they said, well, they're having a teaching upstairs. Do you want to go? I said, yeah, absolutely. And so I went upstairs to this teaching, and there was about 100 people there, 100 adults or so in this room. And the teaching was about the kingdom of God. And it was about government, the government of God. And it was about the gospel. And my heart was pounding so hard. I mean, it has pounded hard since then, but it was really, I just knew that our Father had really heard my prayer and really made a place for me to really be a disciple and really have forgiveness and really give my life to the Son of God in a real, tangible way. You know, it hasn't necessarily been an easy path for me in my time in the community. I've been here for quite a while, but...
How long?
35 years. But all in all, God has been very faithful to me and we live an amazing life. And I've been here ever since. I never left once I came. What is the government of God? What is the standard of being a disciple and the gospel? And, you know, coming out of just being a hearer and actually being a doer is really what he's talking about. Which is really for us to really learn how to love one another. Like, it's really the thing, is to love each other. And love means, you know, being willing to lay down your life, serve, but then also be honest and open with your own life. It's really, you know, a little bit of what love really is. It's the end of selfishness. No more selfishness. So that means it's totally different than this society. Yeah, that's the goal. Yeshua, I mean, you know, Jesus, just so you understand, talking about the scriptural Messiah, he was absolutely selfless. And he died for our sins. Like, he died for my sins. What can I do to express my gratitude for being free from the selfish things I'd done and really deserving of condemnation, really. But because of his mercy and what he did for me, I can serve him the rest of my life and without any regrets whatsoever. So. Yeah.
Okay.